Hello and welcome to another TLDR EU video. We've talked a lot about the lockdown measures that countries have put in place to fight the virus, and whether or not they've been successful on a global scale at flattening the curve and keeping the virus under control. But not all countries have decided to pursue a lockdown. An example of this is Sweden, a country which is often used as an example for not locking down. So in this video, we'll take a look at Sweden's strategy, whether it's been working, and how it compares to other European nations. If you enjoy our EU content, then be sure to subscribe to the channel. Currently, only about a third of you who watch our videos are subscribed, which means that a whole bunch of you are missing out on a ton of our content, especially now that we're planning to post 2 videos a week on this channel that will never be posted anywhere else. So hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to make sure that you don't miss out. Thanks for your support. Despite never locking down, it would be wrong to portray Sweden as super chilled out about the virus. After all, Sweden moved in relatively early on a global scale. On the 1st of February, Sweden declared COVID-19 as a disease that constitutes a danger to society, and in due course set out 6 aims and objectives. To limit the spread of the infection in the country, to ensure that health and medical care resources are available, to limit the impact on critical services, to alleviate the impact on people and businesses, to ease concern, and to implement the right measures at the right time. But despite their early concern, Sweden decided to introduce relatively light touch restrictions. Most countries went one of 2 ways: suppression or complete lockdown. Sweden chose a third way. There was no lockdown. There was no extensive system of contact tracing. Restaurants, bars and primary schools all remained open, with primary schools remaining open to allow key workers to work without having to worry about childcare or take time off. Regardless, it's not to say that they didn't take any action though. Secondary schools were closed. Gatherings of more than 50 people were banned, as well as the government encouraging people to work from home, avoid travel, and urging people to socially distance. So why did Sweden buck the trend and take this light touch approach? Well, Johan Carlsson, head of Sweden's public health agency, in defending Sweden's approach, said that Sweden cannot take draconian measures that have limited impact on the epidemic, but knock out the functions of society. Sweden's approach has been predominantly based on trust in the population and the government. Michael Ryan, Chief Executive Director of the World Health Organization's Emergencies Programme, said in regards to Sweden, what it has done differently is very much relying on its relation with its citizenry. It really has trusted its own communities to implement that physical distance. And this is something that's supported by data. Data from Eurostat, the World Value Study and the OECD places Sweden as one of the countries with the highest levels of trust globally. And that's trust in other people, the legal system and the government. Trust in the government is second in the European Union, only behind the Netherlands, and at a level that's double the EU average. This inherent level of trust can be attributed to the Constitution. Constitutionally, the government is prohibited from meddling in the affairs of administrative authorities, including the Public Health Agency, allowing recommendations from the agency to be seen as genuine based on scientific rationale and not motivated by politics. And unlike other countries, there's no clause or apparatus in Sweden's constitution by which the government can declare a state of emergency during peacetime, with potential restrictions on freedom very likely to be contested. That means that if the Swedish government wanted to impose wide-ranging restrictions on public life, it could not do so unilaterally, and would require additional power from Parliament in order to do so, powers which the government sought on the 16th of April. The temporary bill which was put in effect ends in July, allows for only smaller measures, such as the closure of schools or businesses if so necessary, but does not allow for wide-ranging curfews or lockdowns. This means that Swedish citizens ultimately have a fundamental right to freedom of movement. Everyone shall be protected in their relations with the public institutions against deprivations of personal liberty. All Swedish citizens shall also, in other respects, be guaranteed freedom of movement within the realm and freedom to depart the realm. In effect, protecting citizens from any blanket limitations of freedom of movement or stay-at-home orders. This freedom isn't absolute, however, and specific limitations are permitted, but only if they're particularly narrow in scope and have parliamentary approval. Anders Tegnell, the state epidemiologist for Sweden, when defending Sweden's approach of trust, said, "That's the way we work in Sweden. Our whole system for communicable disease control is based on voluntary action. The immunisation system is completely voluntary, and there's 98% coverage. You give them the option to do what's best in their lives. That works very well, according to our experience." Jens Henriksson, CEO of Swedbank, Sweden's biggest mortgage broker, said in support of the measures, "The actions that the Swedish government have taken are good. It perhaps makes the performance of Sweden's economy less bad than other economies." Something that again appears to be backed up by the data. Provisional figures for the first quarter of this year put Sweden's economic decline at just 0.3%, compared to a 3.8% Eurozone average, 4.7% for Italy, 5.2% for Spain, and 5.8% for France. That being said, Sweden is unlikely to escape the worst of it in the long run. Forecast by the European Commission predicts a fall in GDP by 6.1% for this year. And the country's central bank, in their monetary policy report, predicts an even worse picture for GDP decline of 7 to 10%, with unemployment rising to 10 to 11%. But it does seem that they've been able to avoid some of the worst economic damage. A major question, nonetheless, is whether Sweden's approach has actually worked. People evidently are changing their lifestyles. There's been a near 70% fall in daily restaurant turnover in the month through to the 22nd of April, and a 28% fall in card transactions. After all, restaurants being open doesn't mean that people feel safe to go to them. However, these stats do still look high when compared to countries like Germany and the UK, where daily restaurant turnover fell nearly 100%. And when it comes to card transactions, they fell 66% in neighbouring Denmark and 70% in Finland. But enough about lifestyle changes. What do the figures actually say about the health of the country? According to data from Johns Hopkins Coronavirus Resource Centre, as of the 18th of May 2020, Sweden had 30,377 confirmed cases and 3,698 deaths, a mortality rate of about 8.2%, with figures considerably below the likes of the UK, which stand at 243,695 cases and 34,636 deaths. The issue is when you compare Sweden to its next door neighbours, Norway and Finland. Norway had 8,257 confirmed cases and just 233 deaths, a mortality rate nearly 4 times smaller than that of Sweden, while Finland has 6,380 confirmed cases and just 300 deaths, making both countries considerably less affected than Sweden. Even when adjusting those figures for population, the picture doesn't improve dramatically. Using population figures from Eurostat, Sweden has nearly 3,000 cases and 361 deaths per million. Norway has just over 1,500 cases and 43 deaths per million, and Finland 1,156 cases and 54 deaths per million, meaning that Sweden is considerably ahead of its neighbours at a per capita basis. Lynn Goldman, Dean of Milken Institute School of Public Health at George Washington University, said that in Sweden, we're seeing an amplification of the epidemic because there's simply more social contact. But regardless of the immediate considerations, Sweden is apparently playing the long game. The state epidemiologist Anders Tegnell believes that the no-lockdown approach will mitigate the potential for a second wave. In other words, it will breed a form of herd immunity, although it must be stressed that Sweden is not officially pursuing a herd immunity strategy. Talking to the Financial Times, Tegnell said that in autumn there will be a second wave. Sweden will by this time have a high level of immunity, and the number of cases will probably be quite low, but Finland will have a very low level of immunity, which led him to question, will Finland have to go into complete lockdown again? According to a model by Sweden's public health agency, a quarter of people in Stockholm have had the virus at the start of May, compared to 2% of Norway's capital of Oslo. and this higher level of immunity could protect the country from second waves in the future, as the virus is less able to spread among a more immune population. Ultimately though, while the virus continues to spread around the globe, it's hard to say whether one approach is better than another. But what do you think? Is Sweden's no lockdown policy the right one? Or should they have locked down much stronger and much earlier? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we release an EU video. You can also find more from us across other social networks simply by searching for TLDR News. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible.